So what I thought I'd talk about is a little bit of things that have happened since the first of the year. And just kind of go through some of the things that we looked at that, from a political landscape, and I'll get into some of the other things that really weren't necessarily political, but these are some of the events that took place that caused market reactions, okay? So the first thing was Comey's firing, and the immediate response to the market when that happened was we saw a downturn in the market. The market was down for about 2 or 3 days, and then everything kind of quieted down, and the market started to move back up again, and kind of went back to where their original numbers were at. Now we're still dealing today with the Russian deal as far as the allegations, as far as the fixing of the election. What involvement was Russia in fixing the election? One of the things that has come out, I guess, if you will, is they really haven't been able to figure out if Russia did, in fact, interfere with the election, what it did. They said it wouldn't have changed the outcome of the election, so we're not really sure what they did unless they were just putting out information or doing whatever. So that investigation is still going on. They've set up a special prosecutor and all those kinds of things. But again, when the allocations came out, market reactions were minor. It was very minor, and then markets bounced back and started doing what the markets have been doing for the last 5-6 months. The next thing that happened is the Fed decided to start to move forward with interest rate increases. So, the Fed had a meeting, they raised the Fed rate by 1/4 point. Market basically ignored it. We've had another rate increase by the Fed. Market pretty much ignored it. The Fed has taken a stand where they believe that they are going to systematically start raising rates. The effect for you that have money in the bank, what you're going to find out is that the Fed rate increases haven't really affected what you're able to earn with money in the bank, okay? If any of you out here looking to take out a loan, I can assure you the Fed increases have affected what you're going to pay to borrow money. The banks have raised interest rates on loans almost simultaneously with the Fed increase, but we have not seen anything on the fixed side of the fence as far as earnings are concerned. And my belief is, and there's no real way to gauge this, but a lot of these fixed interest rates are based on the 10-year bond yield, and the 10-year bond yield is still coming down. And so with that being said, I could have told you maybe about 3 months ago, we could have got you 3% on a fixed account guaranteed for 5 years. Today, I think we're down to 2.45, even though we've had 2 rate increases. So the rate increases have not done anything to positively affect savings, but they really haven't done anything to negatively affect the market either. And even with the comments that the Fed made about the fact that they were going to systematically start raising rates, still has had no bearing on market performance. Healthcare reform, big topic. I guess some of you might have read that the last Republican effort to do some repair work on the Affordable Care Act kind of went down the tubes yesterday, and so they're back to the drawing board and not real sure where that's all going to end up. Healthcare is a big deal in our country. It is one of the costliest things that people have to live with during their lifetime. And what we've run into under the Affordable Care Act is 2 things. One is that premiums have continually gone up. If your income level is low, you get government subsidies to help you with the cost of the actual cost of the insurance. The second problem is the size of the deductibles that people have to pay if they use the healthcare system. And the problem with that is there are no subsidies. And so the people, even though they could afford to pay the premium with or without the subsidy, they can't afford both. They can't afford the premium, and along with that, they can't afford the deductibles. So that's been a big issue that has been going on, and that's one of the big debates that's taken place in the healthcare arena. You know, do we believe that there's going to be healthcare reform? You know, I do. I think, though, that the actual comment about repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act probably is not going to happen. I think that's what's going to happen is that they're going to have to come together, both parties are going to have to come together and come up with some kind of a bipartisan solution, I guess, if you will, to what's happening within the healthcare marketplace right now. So, so far, that's affected some things. It hasn't, if any of you are on Medicare and you have a Medicare supplement, we've actually seen supplement plans, the premiums reduce in supplement plans, you know, over the last 6-7 months, the actual rates have actually gone down. And I think that's because I'm a lot healthier, so you guys don't have to subsidize my plan. So, you know, I made some strides towards that. But that's been kind of unusual for us to actually see some rate reductions in the supplement plans that have been out there. So those are some of the things that have taken place politically. You know, again, I will encourage you. I don't care if you're a conservative, a moderate, or a liberal. I'm telling you right now, I'm encouraging you to just turn off the news. I'm telling you, if you listen to one side of the news, if President Trump wakes up in the morning, that's a bad thing. Okay, if he gets out of bed, that's no good. And if you look at another part of the news, if he gets up in the morning, that's the second coming. So I'm telling you right now, there's got to be some place in the middle that fits. But in reality, you know, it's really difficult to get, you know, a straightforward answer of things that are going on from the media itself. From our standpoint, from the market standpoint, what we try to look at is what is our analysts telling us and what's happening in the marketplace. And whether you're Trump fans or not Trump fans, since the election took place, these markets have been phenomenal. We've seen tremendous increases in markets. We haven't seen this, honestly, probably since the late 1990s, where we've seen this kind of reaction to the marketplace. And so our goal is to, and Joel will talk about this later, but our goal is not only to try and get what this market's going to give us, but we also want to try and hold on to it. So it's easy to say, hey, you know what, my account's up 20%, my account's up 10, my account's up 8. The reality is, how much of that can I actually hang on to when this market goes into a correction, which we all know, right? This market will correct at some point in time, okay? Can't tell you how much, can't tell you when. The only one that can really do that is Mike, and I'm sure he'll let you know that later when he's got the secret to all this stuff. So, but the reality is that the markets are doing well. Markets are discounting bad news. They are not reacting like we have seen in the past. So the goal is to go in and try it again to gain everything that we can gain while we're going through this, what I consider to be a great market. Let's see what happens now. Okay, so let's talk about Trumponomics. That was a new one that I just heard a few weeks ago, the Trumponomic forecast going on. So one of the things that we're looking at is unemployment. So what's happened since President Trump was elected and actually took office, unemployment rates have still continued to go down. The reality of unemployment is that there are really two unemployment rates that you can look at. One is a measurable unemployment rate. How many people are on the system right now who are drawing a benefit off from the unemployment coffers that are out there? The second one is how many people have fallen off from the unemployment rolls, that they're no longer collecting unemployment, and or two, have just stopped looking for a job. And a third one would be who are now underemployed. So I used to make $1 an hour. Now I'm making 75 cents. I'm working, but I'm not making anywhere near the money I was making before. So when you look at the numbers, we're at one of the lowest unemployment rates, measurable unemployment rates that we've seen in decades, okay? Makes everybody excited when they see the number. Makes the Fed excited. The Fed says, look it, we got low unemployment, the economy's plugging along at a 1.5 to 1.75% growth rate, so we feel we can raise interest rates. But the reality is the real unemployment rate is double digit. people who have fallen off the thing. You might even know some that no longer are eligible for unemployment benefits, and then people who are underemployed. And so that number is really double digit. It's not the 4% that they're talking about in the marketplace. And so when we look at unemployment, we have to look at it for a real number and understand what that means. And as Joe does his research and looks at investments, that's part of what he's going to be looking at, is what's the real number that's out there. Tax reform, I got to be really careful, because this is, to me, this is a huge deal. Do we think that there's going to be tax reform? We do, and the reason we think that is because both sides of the House and both sides of Senate agree that we need to have tax reform in our country. The issue is how much, how soon are we going to see it? So some of the proposals that are out there on an individual side is to eliminate, I think there's 7 tax brackets right now, little ditties in there, something like that, I know, somewhere like that. They want to go down to 3. And they want to expand the amount of the income that falls under each one of those categories. So for example, if you are in a 15% income tax bracket with part of your income and 18% with another part, you could find that once tax reform hits, if they get their way, that all of your income would fall into a 15% bracket, not just a portion of it. So they want to expand that out. And to me, what that does is just puts more money in your pocket, and hopefully what happens is that, now the sales guy says in me, you'll save it, right? You're going to give it to me, okay? But the reality is we really, hopefully you'll spend it, because that'll help stimulate the economy, and that's good for everybody, okay? Corporately, we have the highest corporate tax rate in the world. And so what that does is it takes businesses who normally were doing business here in the United States and pushes them overseas, because they don't want to pay 40% of their earnings in tax. So the tax proposal on the board is this. The Trump White House wants the corporate rate to be 15. Congress said 20, but to be honest with you, doesn't matter. Any reduction is going to be a positive thing. And what you hope for in the reduction is that the corporations will take the money that they're going to save in taxes, and they're going to hire people, they're going to reinvest their money. It's not just going to go, let's say, in the CEO's pocket. For us, just in our business, if they reduce the corporate tax rate to 20%, we could hire 2 brand new people and pay them extremely well with just the savings that we would get off from that reduction in taxes. Now, you notice I didn't say the CEO would take a pay raise, right? Okay, so, unless you guys were to vote right now, then we could, just kidding. So that to us is a real factor that we think could really help stimulate the economy and also continue to stimulate the markets going forward. Dodd-Frank reform. If back in the day, in 2008, anybody remember 2008 and the market collapse? No? It's just a distant memory, is it? Or can you still remember? I go to sleep at night and wake up in a cold sweat remembering what took place. But anyway, what we do as a country normally is this. So we go from little to no regulation to so much regulation that it chokes off everything. So what Dodd-Frank did was it took the disaster that took place in 2008 with the banking industry, and it turned it around and said, we're going to fix this. Okay, so this will never happen again. And so what they did, they put this law together, and so they started to make requirements on businesses and on banking institutions, and they started to classify businesses, banking institutions, insurance agencies as too big to fail. And if you fell under the definition of too big to fail, What happened is that you were restricted on how you could actually invest your money, where your money how you could loan out your money, and that put a damper on lots of things. Mortgages plummeted. The institutions themselves got concerned about being able to make their promises that they paid. I agreed to pay you this, and so they got nervous about doing that. And so this reform that they're talking about is not the repeal of Dodd-Frank. It is, again, trying to take what we never had to what we have today and kind of bring it to the center so that we can have a functional bill that will really allow for things to happen. Any of you here who had a MetLife investment, you know that you got some paperwork and you got letters and stuff like that that told you about MetLife changing part of their company over to a company called Brighthouse. And Brighthouse is a spinoff of MetLife. And the reason that Brighthouse was spun off was because MetLife was tagged in 2016 as one of the insurance companies that were going to be classified as too big to fail. The rationale behind the spinoff is that in order for a company like MetLife to be able to live up to their promises, to say, hey, look, we guaranteed you this rate of return, they had to be able to invest their money. They had to be able to take options on their money. They had to be able to reinsure their money. And so with them being classified as too big to fail, which was going to happen in 2017, they said, we can't have that happen. So what they did, they took their domestic business, both the annuity side of the fence and the life insurance side of the fence, and spun it off into a wholly owned subsidiary of MetLife, but it's a standalone company. So with that, their classification of being too big to fail shrunk. And so the likelihood is that's not going to happen to them. And that means that they can still invest their money and do the things that they had done so that they can fulfill the promises that they made over the years to people who invested their money with them. The company, again, Brighthouse is, like I said, it's a wholly owned subsidiary, but it's like anything else. It's how you play the game. So they rolled it out, so it's a different company. It's 100% stockholder owned by MetLife, and all of the funding is MetLife, but the reality is it was a separate company, so it doesn't calculate into the MetLife calculation when they look at too big to fail. So that's what's happened in Trumponomics. And so what's the market done? You look at your statements, you know what the market's done. The market has continually moved forward, but don't get caught up on the hype now. If you don't follow my advice and you still listen to the news, don't listen about the new record, okay? Don't listen about new records. New records take 1/10 of a point to set. It's not a 20% increase, it's not a 50% increase, it's 1/10 of a point, because we're at an all-time high in the market. So every time it bumps up, if you look on TV and you see the Dow's up 3 points for the day, tomorrow morning you're gonna hear about a new record. Okay, so it's not what it's the hype, if you will. So they got to have something to talk about. So today they're going to talk about, hey, the market's doing great. We've got lots and lots of things that are happening, and man, we're setting new records every single day. Okay, that sells commercial time on TV, and that's kind of what they're doing. If we have a wrinkle, they're going to be selling commercials on TV telling you about how bad the world is. Everything's coming to an end. This is the end of the time. So anyway, so that's kind of the thing. So that's why I'd like you to stay away from the TV. If you really want to know what's going on in the world, ask your kids. They know. Okay, just ask your kids. They know exactly what's going on in the world. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Joe. Joe's got some exciting news, and he's going to show you all of the best guess stuff that he's got for investments. And when he's all done, he will give you a prediction as to where the markets are going to end this year. He was telling me earlier today he thought up 30, 40, I don't know, 50%, but I'm sure he'll clarify that when he comes up.
All right. So everything Wayne promised is a lie, and I'm just going to talk about what I planned on in the beginning anyway. So beyond Trumponomics, just wanted to do a quick recap of some of the terminology that we use in maybe these meetings, what your advisor uses in your individual meetings. We did this last January, but just a recap so you know what I'm saying when I go forward. So we talk a lot in capitalization, large cap investments, mid cap investments, small cap investments. What does it mean? It's basically describing the size of the companies that we are investing to based on their capitalization, their value of their company divided by their share price. So large caps are 10 billion or more. Those are your Apples, your Googles, your Microsofts, Johnson & Johnson, all the big names that we know. Mid caps, 2 billion to 10 billion, and small caps, 200 million to 2 billion for rough estimates. So an overview of our current investment lineup, just speaking equity range right now. We are carrying our large cap investments made up of, these are just some of the samples of what we own. In our ETF platforms, we have our Russell Top 200 Growth, so that's going to be of the Russell 2000, the top 200 growth-oriented large investments. The USA equal weighted, so that's going to be the bigger companies of, we'll call the S&P 500. It's through the MSCI, but it's probably the easiest way to describe it. Equally weighted. So rather than looking at market cap weighted, we are owning a equal amount of each individual stock that's inside there. Mid caps are both in a value blended arena and growth. And then our small caps we're sitting in a blend, so a blend between value-oriented companies and growth-oriented companies, and the difference between that is going to be similar to value of a company that maybe has a lot of cash on hand, is riding a storm out maybe, where growth is going to be more maybe mergers, acquisitions, things like that of other companies that are out there. So that's kind of what we have our hands in today for a core investing. So nothing specific to one sector of the market. When we look at what we do have overweighted, so there's our overweight financial advisor.
Why did everybody look at me?
He's got more hair, so it's got to be somebody else. So the areas that we're finding have some good growth opportunities right now. Technology, that's a no-brainer. The NASDAQ, which holds a lot of the technology stocks in the country, has just been going crazy. Financials, as we see the Dodd-Frank reform, the rising interest rates helps banks because they can profit more on some of that borrowed money. Industrials, that is the Trumponomics, get the country back to work, get the blue collar back to work, and aerospace and defense, because he wants a big military. So we don't necessarily have to agree with everything that's out there or everything that Trump talks about or anybody else does. All we have to do is try and figure out how we make money off from it. So those are the overweighted exposures we have today. And where are we going? So some potential upcoming changes. Earlier this year, we liquidated Energy Holdings and we liquidated biotechnology, which is going to be more pharmaceutical stuff, groundbreaking things. We're looking at going into more of a traditional look at healthcare, because that's not going away. Baby boomers are all getting to that age where healthcare is a major part of your lives, and that is just causing that area of the marketplace to be profitable. International. Last year we left international marketplaces just before Brexit vote, and They really didn't do anything. Brexit went through, nothing happened. International markets have been doing just as well as domestic markets here. So we're not looking to jump in there right now because all we're going to do is buy it 15% higher than we could have bought it last year. So it's something that we just have on our radar today. And we did earlier this year get ourselves into, or actually late last year, into emerging markets. So those are going to be all your tiny countries, Brazil, and China's not tiny, but they're an emerging market because they manipulate a lot of stuff, so they're not necessarily counted as a developed market, but little Latin America countries, small countries that I don't even know where they are or how to say them, but things like that. We got into there year to date, 20%, 25%. We've made a lot of money, so it may be time to cut ties. So we've got our next exit, emerging markets, might be the case. So other than that, everything else is really going as planned, as best as we can. Large caps, specifically large cap growth, technology, and healthcare have been just plowing the way for this market. Everything else is just trailing along, clipping at 3 to 6%, where large caps have been certainly leading the way with its anywhere from 16 to 25, 30% returns. So we're looking for momentum shifts. Large caps can only go so high before everybody sees them as overvalued and looks to take profits. So we go in and we say, where are we going to see that money flow once it leaves those large caps? So goal right now is looking for momentum. And I think that is all I have.
Did you guys like what Joe said? Isn't he smart? Huh? Just so you know, that's my son. Just thought I'd let you know. I'd throw that out there for you. So I never used to say that when he was a kid. I used to deny knowing who he was. So let's talk a little bit about the balance of the year. One more time here. There you go. So again, we're back to healthcare reform. Do we think that healthcare reform is going to be there? Is it going to be something that we're going to be able to get a sense of yet this year? The hope is yes. Okay, but to be honest with you, after what happened yesterday, I'm not convinced that really is going to take place yet this year. But I know it's high on the agenda. But it's only high on the agenda of half of Washington. So we got to get it high on the agenda of both sides, and hopefully we can make some inroads and do some repair work. Tax reform, do we think it'll hit this year? We do. We think it'll be probably the last quarter of this year that we're going to see tax reform, both on a personal and a corporate level. That's the next thing that's going to take into consideration. And do we think there'll be more Fed rate hikes? The answer is yes. The Fed has already said that that's going to happen. They're going to systematically continue to raise rates. But the thing is about the first two is we think that if either one of those actually take place, it's going to be a stimulus for the market to continue to keep the market moving forward. And that's really what we're looking at. And we think that if we get some of this stuff through, the balance of 2017 is going to be a good year, and we think 2018 could follow suit. Beyond that, it's difficult to tell. We have a midterm election that'll take place in November of 19, and as a result of that, what the balance of power will be and that stuff, we don't have any idea. But what we hope for is that whatever happens in 2019, the continuation of the goal to continue to stimulate the market, continue to stimulate the economy, will be forefront in whoever is in power in Congress, when we hit, 2019. So you always have to be optimistic, and you have to be hopeful that will take place. I think that, as Joe talked about, some of the upcoming things that we're looking at doing, some of the changes that are going to take place, and we're looking for momentum, and we're looking to see, what sectors are going to continue to push the market forward. But within the sectors that we're investing in, the other thing that we're looking at are the actual investments themselves. Have they reached their potential? You can be invested in research and healthcare with a particular ETF or a particular stock, But at some point in time, that stock is going to kind of reach its peak. And so what you have to look is, I don't want to get out of research. I just got to find something that's got growth potential. And so that's Joe's responsibility to continue to look at those things to try and find just internally within the sector itself, what are we looking to invest in? A lot of times what happens is that if you have a company that you own stock in, and that company's stock starts to go up and go up and go up, and at some point in time it gets too expensive for people to buy. You know, you get a stock out there that's $1,000 a share, and I got 10 grand in my pocket that I want to invest, and I look at it and say, well, I could buy 10 shares of that company, or I could buy 100 shares of ABC, or I could buy 1,000 shares of XYZ. And a lot of people look at it and think the quantity that they hold is better than the quality. So if they own more, then they have a better chance at investment success. So sometimes these stocks get themselves overpriced. And that's why sometimes you see, I'm sure some of you have been involved in stock splits, right? You know, Dow split a while back, I say a while back, but what was it, 15 years ago or more? They split 3 for 1. And so you've seen the stock splits, and a lot of times that's just generated because the price of the stock got so high that nobody was really interested. So they go in and split the stock out. The stock drops from $100 a share to $30, and all of a sudden everybody's interested again because it's cheap. Okay, same company, just cheap. So people think they can buy more. So again, Joe's responsibility is to continue to look for, how the individual ETFs that we use in sectors are performing. If we think and he feels that they've reached their potential, then the objective is to find other ETFs that still have the potential, get them out of there, and move new ones into place. What else do we expect this year? Well, I expect that tomorrow I'm going to Arkansas, okay? Because my granddaughter's going to medical school and I get to go down and move her in. And so I found out that when we arrived there on Thursday night, but Friday morning when we move her in, it's supposed to be 100. So I'm just going to sit inside of her apartment and let the rest of them haul the stuff up and down the stairs. So, but that's one of the things I know for sure it'll happen. That'll happen this year. But where will the market end up? That's our job is not to predict markets. Our job is to prepare you for the market. Okay, we know right now that the key is that there's a certainty of uncertainty in the market. Okay, and that's our job, is to try and get you prepared, for the time that happens. And that. I mean, we've talked about this lots of times. We're extremely watchful about what's happening in the market. We look at things on constantly and are ready if we have to move. But for those of you who have been investing for a long time, if anybody can remember back in the day when the Dow was, I'm going to date myself now, when the Dow was 250, and if you had a 100-point drop in the Dow when the Dow was at 250, that was absolute disaster. Okay. If you have a 100-point drop today when the Dow's at 21,000, it doesn't mean a thing. A triple-digit down in the Dow today doesn't mean a thing. If the Dow dropped 1,000 points, I'd be concerned. If the Dow's dropping 100, 200 points, I'm not concerned, because you're looking at a whole different number and a whole different percentage. So if you look at really the percentage of the downturn, if somebody said to me, listen, when I invest my money, I don't want to lose. I don't want to lose more than 10%. You realize that if you're in the Dow, the Dow's got to drop by over 2,000 points for you to even look at a 10% loss in your account. We haven't seen those things. Not saying they can't happen, but today we haven't seen that, and we're certainly prepared for those kinds of things, and we're prepared for any kind of a move that wouldn't be necessary if we saw those things take place. So with that, I'm going to have Mike come up. Mike's going to talk. Probably, what do you got, about an hour on Social Security? So we'll have him do that, and I'll be back and talk a little more here.
I have to talk really slow for an hour. Not really. No, I have, honestly, no one's going to believe me. I have very little to say because, right, who's clapped? I want to know who clapped. Joe. Who thought it was funny that Joe took a picture of me when I wore a tie and had hair? I didn't think that was funny at all. No, my job tonight, Wayne said, Mike, I want you to talk about Social Security and what's going on, what's in the news today, what's new. And when I wrote up my notes, and we actually have to, when we do this, submit it to compliance. And we submit things to compliance, we have to tell them kind of what we're going to talk about, which is, you know, to make sure that we're not out making outrageous claims. There wasn't really much had changed, and I guess that hasn't changed from that date, although a couple things have, so I'll cover that. First of all, the thing that I have been talking to folks about with Social Security, everybody always asks me, who's it going to affect? Because we all know there's a problem in Social Security, right? We all know that money's been used that shouldn't have been used, and good news here, we're all living longer, so there's a problem that was created with the Social Security annuity. And what does that mean? That means more money needs to be added, or we need to get less out of the Social Security system. A lot of the proposals that I have seen, and I go on to the Social Security website all the time, is all around if you're 55 years or younger, that's where the effect is likely going to take place. And when they say effect, guys, you know what that means, right? Reduced benefit. So if you're over 55, there's not many folks talking about changing what was promised to pay, or those of you that are on Social Security, it's not really discussion about reducing or eliminating that. But there is a lot of discussion for folks 55 and younger. When does that 55 cut off? I don't know yet. It may take, I'm hoping it takes about 5 years for that to happen, so I can be 55 and make it work for me. I'm not greedy. But that's the rumor on the street. Doesn't mean it's real, but that's the rumor on the street. The part that dealt with the compliance side of things that wasn't really there when I said initially I would submit this, Social Security come out and said, hey, guess what? We got great news. We actually did a little better than we thought we did. The projections were that Social Security would run into solvency issues, which means not run out of money, but have to change benefit in the year 2033. They've now extended that to 2034. So huge improvements by 1 year. But it's better than going the other way, right? Disability, Social Security is a scary one. They actually, 2 years ago in October, they said, hey, we have until December or it's in trouble. That's how close it got. So logically, the thing to do is go to the Social Security Retirement Trust Fund, which has got so much money, and shift money over there. Don't fix the problem, just steal it from another spot. Well, that now has a 5-year life expectancy. So there's still issues there. The good news is, I guess, looking at the glass half full, is it has extended by a year, but only a year. What does that mean? If the Social Security Trust Fund in 2034 now actually follows through, Social Security Trust Fund would not be able to make good on 23% of its promise to pay. So if you're making $1,000 a month from Social, or receiving $1,000 a month from Social Security, you'll get $770 a month in a reduction, 23% reduction. It's not gone, it's just reduced, okay? And here's the exciting news. Again, just come out along with we've extended it by a year, is there's likely going to be an increase in Social Security to all you folks on Social Security retirement, an increase in 2018 of 2.2%, on average $28, okay? But the part that's left out is there's also going to very likely be an increase on Medicare. So we put that under the classification of easy come, easy go. So the good news is it's not zero. The bad news is it's probably by and large going to be taken away from you as usual. So that's me and my Social Security news. I told you I'd be brief, right? All right, we'll be back up, I think, for questions in a little bit here.
So I just want to take a couple of minutes and talk to you a little bit about the Department of Labor fiduciary rule. You may or may not have heard about this. I know we've talked about it a little bit before. I just want you to know that it went into action on June the 9th of this year. I'm sure you guys all saw a huge change in our business operation and the way that you guys are treated and those kinds of things. And if you didn't, I apologize for that, simply because the DOL rule is here. It's something that we're going to live with, but as a fiduciary standard, we took on a fiduciary role back, I'm going to say 20 years ago. And so really the effect of the DOL rule on us as an office and the way that we transact business and the way that you receive the services that we provide, my guess is you're not going to see anything that would be any kind of a change to what you've seen in the past. Across the industry, that's not so much the way. The DOL rule has changed to what, and Greg hates to hear this and he even hates to talk about it, it's putting the client's best interest first, okay? That's what the DOL, we needed a rule for that. So we now have that rule that says you have to put the client's best interest first. So then we look at that and think, okay, well now are we leveling out the playing field? You know, is that really what's going on? So we that accepted the fiduciary role years ago, now are going to be dealing with advisors out there who didn't necessarily live up by that rule, are going to have to live by that rule. And there's a difference in suitability and putting the client's best interest first. It used to be under the old standard, the investments had to be suitable for the investor. Now that changes and says you have to make sure that the investments that you're recommending are in that client's best interest. So you could have had 10 products that were suitable, doesn't mean that not just one of them could have been strictly in the best interest of the client, but you could have used any 10 of those. Now that's changed. And I got to be honest with you, from our office standpoint, we're okay with that. We're okay with that. We think that leveling the playing field makes sense. And it's long overdue. There's some pretty cumbersome things that have to happen. You know, hopefully you won't see it. You know, hopefully Danielle and Pamela and Bridget and Vanessa, they'll be dealing with that, because it's additional paperwork and additional disclosures and additional things that we have to do internally in our office. So what that means for you is you might be given, instead of getting, you know, now when you open up a new account, you get a small packet of paper about this big. So the new one might be this big. So when we give you all the stuff that goes along with that. But the reality is that we think that the fiduciary rule overall is a good thing. And it needs some tweaking, which is going on right now. Full implementation, I think, is in February of 2018. Am I right?
I think so.
Somewhere like that. Right now it's in, it's being looked at again as far as some of the components to it, but we think overall the best interest concept will stay in place, which we think is a good thing. Some other things that you're going to see happening. You know, I've challenged all of our advisors and our staff to start to look at, we've instituted some training on a national basis that talks about behavioral financial advice. And that, coupled with the actual management of money, we think is going to bring more value to the table to you guys, give us an opportunity to maybe look a little deeper into you personally and what your real lifetime goals are and those kinds of things, and be able to adjust how we provide advice so that we can capture not only the market performance but also help you work yourself through issues that take place in your life, whether it's a market condition, something that personally takes place in your life. And so we're kind of all going through that training right now. And I think that you'll start to see some of that rolling out, I would think, probably in the next couple of months. So it's nothing that, we're not going to bring you in and put you on a couch and, take a pad and say, hey, tell me all your, So, and if one of these guys tries that, let me know. That's not what it's supposed to be. So, but the reality is we really want to dive into that as well. So with that, I'll have Mike and Greg, if you guys can come up, and Joe and Eric, and Pamela, can you come up too? And the reason I'm not picking on you. I just want, if anybody has any administrative issues that they'd like to talk about, come on up and you can answer their questions, okay? Because you know how good we are about that. See, now in the office, at least for me, we only have one ink pen, and they don't give it to me, okay? So what they do is they have one. Pamela has the office ink pen, and so she is in charge of that and doesn't let us touch anything that has to do with paperwork. So anyway, if you guys have any questions about anything we talked about tonight, anything administratively that Pamela could answer for you, the one thing I do want you to know, and don't want to take any, I don't want to take any thunder away from anybody. I don't know where Vanessa went, but, oh, there she is. Vanessa has asked for a pizza oven for the front of the office, and one of those rotisseries, so that if you want to, you can just stop in and get a slice. So that's something that we're looking at maybe for the fall. So anyway, any questions? I got to tell you, truthfully, somebody asked me one time when I was going to retire, and I said, well, you need to talk to my wife, talk to her, because she doesn't want me at home. So the key was, in the discussion, they asked her, and she said, he'll retire when his feet pop up. And I said, one of the things I'll tell you is when the time comes that I'm not here anymore, and I'll tell you when that happens. I made a deal with God that the minute that I was able to shoot par on a golf course, he could take me, okay? So I got a feeling I might be around here a long time, but that's, but anyway, I will tell you what I've said is that when the time comes for me to go home, that I am 100% hoping that you guys miss me. But I guarantee you, and this is the only guarantee you're going to get out of me, I guarantee you your money will not miss me. These guys are fantastic, okay? Fantastic. So, yeah. All right. So with that, any questions anybody's got? That's a great question. In fact, that came up on our asked and answered questions for our newsletter. Today, what I would tell you is this, that when you look at the merger and the eventual split into 3 companies, you have to look at that split as actual IPOs. Those are initial public offerings on those companies. Today, unless you're an insider, I don't believe that there's anybody out there that really can give you any valuable information as to what you should be looking at. We're trying to gather information all the time, to see if we can come up with some kind of meaningful recommendation. And both Mike and I today met with clients who own Dow stock, and the question they're asking us is, what's your recommendation? It's at $66 a share. What do you think we should do? And so the key is that one, I will tell you that you never can get chastised for taking a profit, right? I mean, that's number one. But number two, at some point in time here in the future, you're not going to have a choice. The stock is either going to get liquidated or it's going to get split, and that's what's going to take place. So until we have better information, it's tough for us to give you that kind of an answer. I'd like to tell you, but I don't even know what these companies are going to look like when the time comes. And I got a feeling that only a few people really know what that's going to be about. But that's a great question, and we're getting that more and more all the time. And then it always reverts back to, well, I've got all this Dow stock. What do you think? And what should I do with that? So, good question.
Good question, and I've heard, I probably know as much as you do, I've just heard discussions of that. I mean, I think that's one of the big bubbles. Years ago we had the housing crisis. In that correction right now, we've got a little over $1.3 trillion in unsecured student loan debt. And that's a big number that's out there, and that's the big concern, is what's going to happen with these kids who are not able to purchase homes, not able to invest in the community because they're strapped with these student loan payments. So that is something that's being talked about, is the potential relief of some of the debt that's out there. There are currently programs out there through the federal student loan program where there are loan forgiveness programs in place that are already potentially do allow for the forgiveness of debt if, depending on a student's balance, their income, if they're not able to make those payments. There are programs in place now without having an adverse effect on that student's credit that may allow them to have some of that discharge. But as far as a general across the board discharge of debt, I know that that's been discussed. I don't have a clue how that would get funded and what that would look like, but I know it is something that's being actively discussed in Washington.
Joe said he believes that the value has gone up about $3.5 trillion. One of the comments somebody wrote here, there's three things that are on here, and I'll try and address them. First one was, it's not really the first one, I'm taking them in reverse order because I'm doing the easiest one first. It says, who provides your continuing education? That comes from several sources. American College, Kaplan College, the SEC, and FINRA. FINRA is our governing body that oversees us to make sure that we stay in compliance with the things that we do. So they provide courses that we have to take each year, to get through that. Our broker-dealer, Securities America, provides what they call a firm element, which is a series of continuing education classes that we have to take every year and complete by the end of the year. If you're talking the insurance end of the business, the state of Michigan requires that we put in 30 continuing education classes, and then they have a variety of those that we can subscribe to, and then take those classes, and we have to have 30 hours of continuing education for that as well. Congress needs to propose a package to improve on ACA. Why the push to pursue any change instead of creating a great package for the country? Shame on Congress. You're not going to get any argument up here, okay? That's not, that I agree with whoever wrote this. I agree 100%, because the reality is that the Affordable Care Act is here. The Affordable Care Act has things in it that are extremely valuable, and it doesn't necessarily need to be replaced and done. And why the rush? I can't answer that question. I don't know why the rush, but it really needs to be addressed, and it needs to be on a bipartisan level, and it needs to put you first, not Congress, not the Democrats, and not the Republicans. It should put you first. So maybe they should act under the fiduciary rule instead of, just us. So what's best interest for their client? And that's all of us. Not much said about the world situation. How long can we afford to wait on the missile situation in North Korea? It's amazing the market hasn't been seriously affected by this yet. Let's see. I'm being taped. Right, yeah. Okay. The president of North Korea is a hell of a golfer. That guy, in his first time he went golfing, got 13 holes in one. Okay? So I'm not sure. I just, I'm just blown away. But the reality is, nobody wants a conflict. That nobody wants. The only conflict that's going to happen in North Korea is there's not going to be a diplomatic solution to North Korea unless China will step up and take an active role within North Korea. China is their biggest trading partner. And if China will step up and imply or apply sanctions to North Korea, you might be able to get something. This guy I'm just giving you my opinion. This guy is a pompous ass, and somebody needs to go in and just box his ears for him. But and you're coming from an old military guy, so I'm saying, okay, blow that guy right out of the sky. But that's probably not the right answer. So hopefully somebody with more diplomatic ability than mine would take that over. But I really think that's it. China's got to step up to the plate, and so I think that they that you never know what's going on. Everybody rattles their saber. China says, hey, it's not our problem. Russia says, hey, it's not our problem. But that's what they do for the press. I have no idea what these guys talk about, afterwards. They're probably sitting down having a beer together and doing what, and saying, yeah, hey, let's just keep everybody on edge and we'll do whatever, but, whatever. So, but yeah, I think that somebody needs to take care of him. He's a nice guy, but somebody needs to take care of him. Okay, so the question was, with us being so far in debt, how can we afford to reduce taxes? Well, the answer is pretty simple. When I say that, the reduction in taxes has to be coupled with some cut in spending so that it's there, okay? So now you know how well we are at cutting spending, right? So right now we borrow money every day so we can send it somewhere else, okay? That's the thing. We don't have the money here to fulfill our obligations to all the countries, so we just keep borrowing it and we keep sending it elsewhere. So the first thing that would have to happen, again, was we need a balanced budget in our country and some kind of a deficit plan that will start to reduce the deficit itself. But I got to be honest with you, I don't know that there's anybody in this room during your lifetime will you ever see this that debt taken care of. This debt is huge, and if you ever look at it from a really dollar and cent standpoint, it's virtually impossible to get rid of. Now, what would happen if the U.S. defaulted? It stopped paying their debt, they stopped paying their obligations, stopped supporting countries. The world would be in chaos. So, that the only way they can reduce taxes is they have to find some spending cuts that they have to look at. And supposedly, that's supposed to be a law. They're not supposed to be able to cut revenue without cutting expenses that would match up. But the problem you see with that is they tell you that they're going to reduce taxes, they're going to cut expenses, and so the two of them will match up around the year 2032. So it's not happening in 1 year. So it's like an expanded deal. They say, well, it's going to take 10 years, but 10 years from now, well, in 10 years, we'll have a different regime in Washington, and they'll change their mind and they'll raise. And so every year, don't they go in and have this vote to raise the spending limit? Yeah, let's spend some more, so, yeah. And I don't care, again, politically, it's not about being a conservative, it's not about being a liberal, it's not about being a moderate. It's about what happens with our money. What's going on in our country that is allowing us to continue the debt that we're amassing all the time. I'm okay with debt as long as there's some way that we can see that we're going to be able to pay that off at some point. I don't see that today. Yes, sir. So you're telling me you're getting close to shooting par? No, I hear you, and I'm no different than you are. I got 12 grandkids. I love them to death. I got 2 great-grandkids. I worry about them every single day. I worry about what their future is going to look like. I worry about what kind of income they're going to have. I worry what kind of opportunities that they're going to have. And the idea is that when election day comes, whatever, vote your conscience. Whatever it is, just vote it, and hopefully the people that you put in office will agree with what you're doing and make the changes that need to be made. And so hopefully that'll happen. But if they don't do something, it's inevitable. It's going to happen. Yeah. And the other thing that you're doing is competition is leaving because you got companies that are dropping right out of the Affordable Care Act. They won't participate. So the field is narrowing as far as what you've got choices for. When that happens, knowing under the Affordable Care Act that you have to take everybody, you can't just be selective with who you take, the rates are going to have to go up because I can go buy insurance from a private carrier. Okay, if your health is good, you can go buy it from a private carrier. You'll pay less money than what you'll pay under the Affordable Care Act. But if you got an illness, you're going on that thing, and it's no different than what Blue Cross faced in Michigan, being the only company in Michigan that was required to accept everybody, regardless of health. And so their rates went through the roof because that's what they had insured for. Nobody else would take the people, so they got them all, and that's what's really happening under this concept too. So companies are just bailing out, saying we're not going to do it anymore. Yeah. Okay, so with that being said, nobody asked Pamela anything, and she is, are you disappointed? Not at all. Okay. Anyway, I just want to thank everybody for coming. We'll all be around to answer questions after this is over with. Again, from the bottom of my heart, I thank all you guys for placing your trust in our firm. You have no idea how much that means to us, and you have no idea how committed these people are to making sure that the things that you're trying to do in life is foremost in their mind. We wake up every day and we come to work to serve what your needs are, and that's never going to change as long as I'm up here and as long as these guys are here. So thanks again, appreciate it. Have a wonderful night and enjoy your drive home in the nice sunshine. Thanks.